Oh, you're just using this
A
to
podium? We're having
yeah.
a discussion on TV.
No,
This is
it's not.
Spectator TV. This is
Not a
supposed to
discussion.
be.
You're telling me what I did and what I plan to do and what
Sorry,
my
did you contact women who'd been
yes I
fighting for
did and
single-sex spaces
nobody
prior
called.
to writing the play?
Hello and welcome to The View from 22. I'm Natasha Feroze, The Spectator's Deputy Broadcast Editor, and today we're going to be talking about a play at the Edinburgh Fringe next week called TERF C. It has caused the controversy you might expect, so I'm joined now by Josh Kaplan, the writer, and feminist author and writer Julie Bindel. Julie and Josh, thanks so much for joining us on The View from 22. Josh, you have written the play TERF, which is going to be performed at Edinburgh Fringe shortly in August. Just to start off, could you tell us about the play?
Sure. It's a fictional imagining of a conversation between JK Rowling and Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, and Rupert Grint, in which they organize like an intervention to discuss the controversy, and interspersed between those scenes are scenes that flash back to J.K. Rowling's earlier life. So it just like the focus is on the intervention, but there are moments that look back that are like flashbacks.
What is the controversy?
The controversy over the tweets over trans rights. Mostly, it's over the social media use of social media and the argument, the debate. I don't know how to put that. I think everybody knows what the controversy is.
Not everyone is familiar with the term TERF. So, to you, we know that the TERF is described as a trans exclusionary radical feminist, but is it deemed in the play as a derogatory term?
It's used in a derogatory sense and in both senses. It's used in a sense of pride at some point, and in a sense of and derogatory, both ways.
What are the sort of themes or ideas you're hoping to relay in the play?
So as a, I won't be too. I will say just on top that like I'll give you an answer, but my answer will boil down to see the play. Because it's an 85-minute show. And so whatever I say here is going to be I'm going to be putting it into like a tweet, which is exactly the reason why I wrote the play, not to tweet. But in general, like the themes of the play are, well, first of all, it's a family play. I look at it as a family. So JK Rowling, Daniel, Rupert, and Emma, I just see them in my mind, fictional mind. I don't know if it's true. But in my mind, it's a parental figure and three siblings, and having all those fights that we all have with our generational fights with our parents and our children and things like that. So there's that, and learning how to talk and seeing how you can have a conversation with people that are of a different mindset than you. There's the social media side of it, which is something that I have felt very strongly about for a very long time. I've never been on social media. I'm not a fan of social media. I think it's overall. I think it's a negative, especially Twitter. I've never had Twitter. The play has a Twitter, but I don't have a Twitter. And there is parts about trans rights. Absolutely, it's a trans rights. There's trans rights. There's parts about women's rights. There's parts about the confluence, the intersection, and the perceived conflict between those. There's stuff about Harry Potter. There's stuff about the art versus the artist. Whether you agree with J.K. Rowling or not, can you enjoy Harry Potter? Can you still be part of that world? There's just a lot of different parts. That's why I say you have to see the 85-minute play.
I want to ask you more about the play, but just quickly, Julie, what was having read sort of the synopsis of what the play is going to be about, and Josh, you might not be on Twitter, but there has been quite a lot of talk on Twitter about the play itself. What is your first impressions of what this play could be like?
I mean, I still have no idea, having heard Josh describe what it's supposedly about. So I also haven't seen anything. I haven't looked for anything about it on Twitter. Obviously, it's called TERF, and it was going to be called TERF, and then the other 4-letter word that is misogynistic and a slur against women, which of course is the C word. And the word TERF is often thrown at women like me, feminists, and Rowling, and the rest of the feminist movement as a way to still look progressive if you're a man who says that you're on the liberal left of any kind of position, but be able to hate and throw scorn on women and on feminists, and in fact disparage us for fighting for our rights, which I suppose leads me to the first point that Josh made when you asked him what was the play about. And Josh said this is about the conflict around trans rights. No, this is not a conflict about trans rights at all. Every single feminist that I know understands that any marginalised group of people have the right to dignity, have the right to human rights in general. This is about women's rights. This is not about keeping trans people, trans women, however you wish to describe men that identify as women, out of women's spaces, which is where the controversy comes about. It's about keeping men out of women's spaces. So it's about women's rights, controversy, and it's about feminists like me and Rowling and the hundreds of thousands of other active feminists around the world that campaign to end male violence against women and to reduce the likelihood of it happening. So I see the play as a slur on women against feminists, as a very provocative, come and see this bashing of these women, these horrendous witches played out in, on a stage.
Josh, I obviously want to give you a chance to talk about that, but just before I do, could you clarify a couple of things about the original title of the play and how that has changed, and whether there's been any sort of change in the script since then?
Sure. The play, yes, the play was originally titled what Julie just said it was titled. I'll tell you that I wrote a pilot before this about a gay Jewish Nazi vigilante in Nazi Berlin, and the title of that pilot was "Dirty Jewish Faggot." So you can take what you want from that. I think there are assumptions being made that if you think about that, and then you think about the way that I titled my play, I think you will start to think again about the reason for the title. I think what Julie is saying, I understand, but Julie, you have not seen the play. You have not read the play. You don't know anything about the play. The only thing that you're basing this on is tweets and maybe
I haven't seen any tweets, Josh. I haven't seen any tweets
maybe
at
a
all.
little snippet.
And
So
I
then you're basing
do
it
get.
on. Then you're basing it on a synopsis. You're not.
No,
You have not seen the
no.
play. You have not read the play. You don't know.
No, I think that also it's quite clear that you don't understand how TERF is a slur that hasn't yet been reclaimed to the point of where some obvious slurs have, and you mentioned faggot. I do understand that point, in that I've just actually written a chapter for a book that I'm writing on lesbians, which is entitled Dirty Filthy Lesbians, and it's obviously from a quote that has been used against lesbians prior to that. The problem that I have with the term TERF being used, which is obviously, I would say, a provocative title to get people to go and watch this play. And you're right, I don't know anything about it, but what I do know about it leads me to this conclusion that it's probably quite irresponsible, I think, to not recognise how much violence, threats and intimidation there's been from trans rights activists, most of whom aren't actually trans people, but from the usual social justice warriors, mainly male, very violent men in black balaclavas and the like, who call themselves Antifa and the like, who have actually physically attacked women, who have punched women, and I myself have been attacked by such a man, who have threatened to rape and kill women, and these threats have been taken seriously. There have been several criminal charges and convictions of these men, and men that have actually raped and sexually assaulted women, claiming that they are the victims of these women's bigotry and prejudice. So I think using the term TERF in today's climate, where it is being used as one of the most incendiary terms against feminists. Remember, we are left-wing liberal feminists. We haven't just all of a sudden taken some magic pill to make us Nazis and bigots and start hating marginalised people. So I think that the play clearly is trying to give an impression that this word is what? Playful? That there's another word that perhaps is equal to that we call trans people, left-wing feminists call trans people. I don't think that you can find one.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you are enjoying this broadcast, I think you should subscribe to The Spectator. It is, after all, the greatest magazine in the world. At the moment, we have a very special offer on, which you can take advantage of. You can get 3 months of The Spectator for only £3. To take advantage of this extraordinary offer, visit spectator.co.uk/TV offer. Do it.
Josh, I wanted to ask you about JK Rowling and her role in this. You talked, I think I read somewhere that the play draws on her views on gender identity and looks back at some confrontations with key male figures over her life, her first book editor, her abusive ex-husband, and her father. Did you get in contact with JK Rowling before writing the play?
No, it's all fictionalized. It's all based on interviews that I've read and seen with her, mostly with her. But no, I have reached out to her since writing the play. But I didn't think that anybody would actually contact me or be in touch with me.
And have you reached out to any other so-called TERFs in order to write the play?
In order to write the play, no. After we wrote the play, I did reach out to different people on both sides, and I didn't hear back from anybody.
What a surprise. What a surprise. And the other thing is, Josh, that I wanted to just say, because obviously Rowling, who I know, is a part of a wider women's liberation movement. So this is not something that any of us that are trying to desperately maintain women-only spaces and protect women from rape and sexual assault and violence. We don't do individual kind of ego trips about this. We are part of a movement. We're feminists. Many of us have had sexual violence, male sexual violence, which is why we don't want other women and girls to experience it. And this is what the gender movement is hoping to achieve, just that absolute carte blanche to be in women-only spaces that we fought for decades in order to address this huge problem of male violence. But one thing to say about Rowling is all of this kind of fictionalized idea of conversation or dialogue between Radcliffe and Watson and the like. She's not anybody's mummy. She isn't a mummy. She is an author. She should be given the same respect as male authors. And I think that the idea that somehow you've written a play which is exploring this whole issue, so you said trans rights, and then you said women's rights, and the supposed conflict, I think they were the words that you used, or this apparent conflict. And yet to not contact those of us that have been fighting for decades as feminists to uphold, in fact, some of us built those women-only spaces that have now been invaded by and put at risk by trans activists, rape crisis centres, women's refuges, women's prisons, hospital wards, changing rooms. Those of us that have fought to maintain those, I would have thought that maybe if you were looking at a kind of a dialogue within this fictionalized piece, that you might have actually made an attempt to look at what we are saying and why, but clearly not.
Josh, do you want to respond to that?
Not really. I think that Julie's just using this as a podium, this is just pretty typical. You're just using this to
podium. We're having a discussion on TV. No, this is Spectator TV. This is supposed to be.
You're telling me what I did and what I plan to do. And
sorry, did you contact women who'd been fighting for single-sex spaces prior to writing the play, Josh?
No, not prior to writing the play. No.
Right. So you wrote the play with having spoken to who? Just in your head? Just your idea about what trans rights are and how these horrible women who just want to take away the rights of marginalised groups, how
You
they
still
have
haven't seen the
operated.
play. You haven't read the play. You don't know anything about the play, and you don't know me at all. You're
Right,
making
but
all these
you definitely wrote a play that
Yes, I wrote a
explores the
yeah.
conflict, did you? But didn't speak to any of the women that have been fighting against gender ideology and the invasion of men in women's spaces at first. You just decided to write a play that you labelled TERF, that you called TERF in the first instance, and that you focused on a woman who has had death and rape threats. Incidentally, many of us have had them. As I say, this isn't about one woman who has decided to take on this fight on her own as the superhero. That's what men tend to do. This is a woman who is part of a feminist movement who herself has spoken out about being raped and sexually assaulted and experienced domestic abuse. But you throw in some fictionalized version of her ex-husband, the violent one, presumably. You don't talk to any feminists, and you put this play on, and you expect that we're supposed to just take you in good faith. I mean, come on.
You don't have to take me in good faith. You can just see the play or not see the play. You can do what you want.
I believe
I'm
that the
not.
play should be on. Rowling would, I'm sure, I don't know, I haven't asked her about this, we've never spoken about it. But of course, she's on the free speech side of things. We all are. So no one's suggesting that the play shouldn't be on. But you're trying to suggest that this is looking at the dialogue, the potential fictionalized dialogue, when really you've just looked at one side, haven't you,
But you don't
Josh?
know. You don't know. You have not
Then
seen
why
the.
wouldn't you do your research by speaking with those of us that all of a sudden, according to trans rights activists, have turned into bigots and Nazis and fascists
Because
on
you're
the
making an
extreme right
assumption
wing?
about what the
When
play
we're
says.
left wing feminists, we're human rights defenders.
You're
Why do
making
you think we're talking
you're making endless
about
and
the
endless.
danger to women's spaces? Do you think it's because we're bigots?
You can. I'm not. I'm done with this part of the conversation.
Josh, just because your play is about JK Rowling, I just wanted to know. I think maybe the audience who might not be familiar with what actually happened to JK Rowling, maybe you could explain a little bit about what really did happen when she wrote her open letter about being a gender critical feminist, and then what happened with the Harry Potter cast and how that plays out in your play.
Sure. I mean, as far as I know, in the history of it, is that she wrote the letter. I think the first tweet I think was "I stand with Maya," and then there was the essay that she posted. Very soon after that, and then that was 2020. Very soon after that, I think I'm not sure if it was Daniel or Emma. One of them was the first to come out and say I stand with trans rights. Daniel said it, and then Rupert said it. And it wasn't like much of a conversation or a debate, public debate within them. There was just those four of them, but I imagined what the private debate and the private conversation would be, and then it kind of stayed quiet for a very long time, I think, and then earlier this year it once again restarted with everything that's been happening over the past 6 months. So I mean that's a very very broad statement about how the history has been.
Yeah. Julie, could you just tell us a bit about the letter itself?
I mean, it's the same as in many ways, it's very similar to the essays or the articles or the op-eds or the books that many of us have written, which is about why single-sex spaces for women and girls are so important, about sexual violence and domestic abuse, which is both of those violations she's experienced, and about how she would stand with any marginalised group. We've all said that, we all mean it, and I'm talking about feminists who are liberals, leftists, however you want to describe us. I'm not talking about right-wing zealots that rally for Trump and talk about removing the rights of lesbians and gay people, abortion rights, along with those of so-called trans rights. I'm talking about those of us that have got a long history in this movement. And Rowling has long been a feminist and she remains feminist. So I think to write something like that, which also disclosed her sexual and domestic abuse she'd encountered, to then immediately receive death and rape threats from those that say that they are on the right side of history, and those that say that they are just doing what's right in protecting a marginalised group. Says everything we need to know. These are misogynistic men who use the cloak of trans rights in order to scream TERF and other words. As I say, the second word, four-letter slur that you were about to use, that you were going to use in the title of your play, at women, at feminists, and to shut us up, which is what the men's rights movement has always done. And trans rights activists are men's rights activists. And what actually should be happening is a proper dialogue between those feminists and those reasonable trans people who understand this isn't a clash of rights. This is about the complete takeover of women's rights and the elimination of our rights. It's not a clash. It's about the elimination of rights. So this is what, Rowling's piece was about. It's what she has repeatedly tried to say. It's like Martina Navratilova's interventions, where she has been reasonable, where she's been measured, where she has tried to talk about why it's so unfair to have men competing against women and girls in sports. And she has just been told she's a Nazi, bigot, fascist, shut up, etc. And so therefore, of course, women will respond and say, we understand this is a misogynistic men's rights movement. This is because we're not stupid. We've been doing this for a long time.
Josh, lastly, I just want to, you're obviously American, you're from New York, and I think based off of some of the conversations we've had about the original title of the play and the use of the word TERF, when you were writing this, did you have any idea about the weight that the wording carries in Britain, or were you a little bit surprised about perhaps in some cases the public's reaction, and what made you then go to change the title? Did you were you aware before writing it about quite how much of a hot topic using this sort of language and these themes were?
Yeah. Yes and no. I'm not British, and I've spent a lot of time here, but I don't. It's not my culture, and I understand that. And so I knew it was like there was a derogatory sense to it, but I also I don't associate with that in the same way. So yes, I was surprised. I don't feel it like as deeply as I think I would if I were British. Yes, I think that's true. To me, it's an acronym, and I understand that it's not. I understand what Julie's saying, that it's not used as an acronym in a lot of cases. But I think the first time I ever heard it, I was like, oh, that's what that means. Okay. And then the reason that part of the reason that the title was changed was also because whatever nuance and whatever assumptions that people are going to make about the play, you can't understand the title until you see or read or do something with the play and engage with the play. And so if you don't do that, if you only look at the title, which is all we pretty much kind of been talking about, then it's all lost. So that word had to come out for that reason, because people are not going to give it that chance. They're not going to understand the use of the word. I
think Josh isn't feeling it about the word, not because he's an American, but because he's a man. And this is a movement against women, against feminists, and it's a misogynistic movement. And TERF is a misogynistic slur.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Josh. Thanks for joining us on Spectator TV.